Welcome to my channel. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's get started. Lance Cooper's heart pounded as he neared his house, the weight of his duffel bag nothing compared to the anticipation in his chest. It had been 3 long years since he'd held Fiona or seen little Isa's smile. The deployment had been brutal, but the thought of this moment had kept him going through the darkest times. He paused at the front door, taking a deep breath. The familiar scent of jasmine from Fiona's favorite bush filled the air, but something else lingered beneath it, something unsettling. Lance shook his head, blaming it on nerves. He turned the key and stepped inside. The living room looked different, with rearranged furniture and new throw pillows, normal changes after years apart. But as Lance scanned the room, his eyes landed on some unfamiliar items, a man's jacket draped over a chair and work boots by the door that weren't his. "Fiona," he called, his voice tight. "Isa," silence answered him. Lance moved deeper into the house, his instincts a soldier on high alert, but the air felt heavy, almost suffocating. In the kitchen, a half-empty coffee mug sat on the counter. The scent that had bothered him outside was stronger here, cologne, but not his. So Lance's fists clenched. What was going on? A floorboard creaked behind him, and Lance spun around to see his daughter, Isa, standing frozen in the hallway, her eyes wide in shock. "Isa," Lance breathed, a smile breaking across his face. "Baby girl, it's me. I'm home." But instead of running into his arms, Isa's face crumpled. She sank to her knees, tears pouring down her cheeks. "No," she whispered. No, you can't be here. You're dead. They told us you were dead." Lance felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. He stepped toward his daughter, but she flinched. "Isa, what are you saying? I'm not dead, I'm right here." "Arthur buried you," Isa sobbed. "We had a funeral. Mum said you were never coming back." The world seemed to tilt. Lance gripped the kitchen counter to steady himself. "Who told you that?" he demanded. "Where's your mother?" As if on cue, the front door opened. Lance heard Fiona's laugh, followed by a deeper voice, a man's. "Isa," Fiona called. "Where are you, sweetheart?" Lance tensed and moved toward the living room, his muscles tight with tension. He rounded the corner just as Fiona and Warren walked inside, hand in hand, his wife, his brother. Time seemed to slow. Lance watched as Fiona's smile disappeared, replaced with shock, and was that fear in her eyes. Warren's face turned pale, his grip on Fiona's hand tightening. "Lance," Fiona whispered. "Oh my God." "Surprised?" Lance asked coldly. "Seems the reports of my death were a bit exaggerated." Warren stepped forward hesitantly. "Brother, we can explain." "Explain?" Lance's laugh was harsh. "Explain what?" "How you're holding my wife's hand. How another man's things are all over my house. How my daughter thinks I'm dead." Fiona's eyes filled with tears. "Lance, please. We thought they told us you had killed him in action." "We grieved for you." "We you what?" Lance interrupted. "Decided to play house with my brother?" "How long did you wait, Fiona? A week? A month?" "It wasn't like that," Warren cut in. "We were both grieving. It just happened." Lance's vision went red. In 2 quick steps, he crossed the room and slammed Warren against the wall. "It just happened," he snarled. "You just happened to my wife and took my life." "Dad, stop." Isa's voice sliced through the rage. Lance turned to see his daughter standing in the hallway, her face pale with fear. The sight of her distress extinguished some of the fire in his veins. He released Warren, stepping back. "I need answers," he growled, his voice low and dangerous now. Fiona collapsed onto the couch, her hands shaking. "We got the news about 18 months ago," she said. "They told us your unit was ambushed. They had remains. They said they matched your DNA." Lance's mind spun. "That's impossible. I was captured, held as a prisoner, but I'm here now. I'm alive." "We had no way of knowing," Warren said softly. "If we had known, you'd what?" Lance snapped. "Not move into my house. Not take my place in my daughter's life." Isa choked out. "I don't understand. How can you be here? We buried you. There's a gravestone with your name on it." The weight of her words hit Lance like a physical blow. They had buried him, mourned him, moved on without him, while he had fought to survive, dreaming of this homecoming. "I can't be here," Lance muttered. I need to think." He turned and headed toward the bedrooms, needing space, needing air. He found himself in the master bedroom, his bedroom, but it wasn't his anymore. Warren's clothes hung in the closet. His brother's reading glasses sat on the nightstand. Lance's chest heaved. He stumbled into the walk-in closet and sank to the floor in the far corner, hidden from view. There he let the full weight of the situation hit him. Everything he had fought for, everything he had imagined coming home to, was gone. His wife was in the arms of his brother. His daughter didn't recognize him. His very identity had been erased and replaced. Muffled voices drifted from the living room. Lance could hear Fiona's sobs, Warren trying to comfort her, Isa asking questions, confused and hurt. "What are we going to do?" Fiona asked, her voice shaky. "I don't know," Warren replied, "but we'll figure it out together." The word twisted like a knife in Lance's heart. They were a unit now, a family, and he was the outsider. Sitting in the dark closet, surrounded by the remnants of the life that should have been his, something inside Lance hardened. The shock and pain transformed into something colder, sharper. They thought they had buried him. Fine. Let them believe that. The man they once knew, the loving husband, the devoted father, was dead. In his place now sat a soldier. A survivor. A man with nothing left to lose. Lance's lips twisted into a cold grin. They thought they could play happy families, but he was about to show them just how much they had underestimated him. This was far from over. As the panicked voices in the living room continued, Lance began to formulate his plan. He would make them pay for every fake tear, every betrayal, every stolen moment of happiness, and he would begin by tearing apart everything they held dear. Hidden in the closet, Lance's mind raced with thoughts of revenge. He could hear Fiona and Warren moving about the house, their quiet voices a constant reminder of their treachery. When night finally fell, he slipped out unnoticed. For the next few days, Lance kept a close eye on his wife and brother from a distance. He observed them going about their new life together, noting how easily Fiona had adapted to being Warren's wife, till the sight of them laughing and sharing intimate moments filled Lance with a chilling rage. One evening, while they were talking in the backyard, Lance eavesdropped on their conversation. "We need to talk to Isa," Fiona said, her voice tight with concern. "She's confused, Warren. She keeps asking about Lance." Warren sighed. "I know, but how do we explain? The truth is complicated." "Complicated?" Fiona scoffed. "That's putting it mildly. Her father, who she believed was dead, is alive and he hates us. Can you blame him?" Warren asked softly. Fiona was silent for a moment before admitting, "No, I can't. But we thought he was gone, Warren. We grieved for him. We fell in love. That wasn't a lie." Lance's fist clenched at his sides. Their words only fueled his desire for revenge. They would pay for every second of happiness they had stolen from him. The next day, Lance focused on gathering information. Using his military contacts, he began digging into Fiona and Warren's lives' bank accounts, legal documents, private conversations. Nothing was off limits. He reached out to an old army buddy, Jake, who now worked in private security. "Lance, I can't believe it. You're alive?" Jake said over the phone. "What do you need?" "Information," Lance replied. "I need to know everything about my wife and brother's lives over the past 3 years. Leave no stone unturned." Jake hesitated. "Lance, are you sure about this? Maybe you should talk to them. Try to work it out." "There's nothing to work out," Lance interrupted. "Will you help me or not?" Jake sighed. "All right, I'll see what I can dig up. But be careful, man. Revenge can eat you alive." Lance ignored the warning. He had nothing left to lose. As the days went by, Lance's plan started to take form. He would ruin Fiona's reputation first, and then he would destroy Warren's career. They would never find peace again. One afternoon, Lance found Isa alone in the backyard, sitting on the swing he had built for her years ago. "Isa," he called softly. She looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and longing. "Dad, is it really you?" Lance's heart ached at the doubt in her voice. "It's me, sweetheart. And I'm sorry I scared you before." Isa hesitated before running into his arms. Lance held her tightly, his heart breaking as she sobbed. "I don't understand," she cried. "They said you were dead, we had a funeral, and now Uncle Warren." Lance pulled back and gazed into his daughter's eyes. "I know it's confusing, but I need you to understand that I never abandoned you. I fought every day to come back to you. But your mom and Uncle Warren, they made their choices," he said, his voice hardening. Isa looked torn. "I love Uncle Warren," she whispered. "He's been good to us." Lance felt a pang of jealousy but pushed it aside. "I get it," he said softly. "But Isa, you need to know that what they did wasn't right. They lied to you, to everyone." Confusion and hurt flashed across Isa's face. "What do you mean?" Lance hesitated. He wanted to tell her everything, to turn her fully against Fiona and Warren, but he knew he had to be cautious. He couldn't risk pushing her away. "Just keep your eyes open," he said finally. "Things aren't always what they seem." As Lance continued his investigation, he discovered a shocking truth. Fiona and Warren's affair hadn't started after he was presumed dead. It had been going on for months before he was deployed. The betrayal cut deep, reigniting the fury inside him. He drafted an anonymous letter, his hands trembling with rage. "You thought you buried me, but I'm very much alive. The truth will come out soon." He slipped the letter into their mailbox, imagining the panic Fiona would feel when she read it. That night, Lance overheard another conversation between Fiona and Warren. "We have to tell him the truth," Warren insisted. Fiona's voice was frantic. "Are you crazy? He'll never forgive us. We'll lose everything." "We're losing everything anyway," Warren argued. "Maybe if we come clean." "No," Fiona interrupted. "We stick to our story. We thought he was dead. End of discussion." Orland smirked in the darkness. Their lies were already starting to crumble. The next day, he noticed how on edge Fiona had become. She jumped at every noise, her eyes constantly darting around as if she expected him to appear at any moment. He watched as she had a heated phone conversation. "I don't care what it takes," she hissed into the phone. "I need those records gone for good." "No, you don't understand. If this gets out, I'll lose everything, my daughter, my reputation, everything." Lance's smile grew colder. She had no idea how right she was. As the days went by, Lance's determination only grew stronger. He watched as Fiona and Warren's seemingly perfect life started to fall apart under the weight of his invisible presence. One evening, he overheard them arguing again. "This is all your fault," Fiona snapped. "If you hadn't pushed for us to get married so fast, my fault." Warren's voice rose. "You were the one who wanted to move into the house. You wanted to play happy families, and you were more than eager to step into your brother's shoes." Fiona's sharp retort only reinforced what Lance already suspected. They were opportunists, eager to build their happiness on the ruins of his supposed grave. Lance's military background proved useful as he gathered more damning evidence: bank statements showing substantial withdrawals around the time of his death, emails revealing their relationship, long invoice appointments. Everything was coming together. He called Jake again. "I need one more thing," Lance said. "Find out who signed off on my death certificate. Someone must have made it official." Jake hesitated. "Lance, are you sure you want to go down this path? Maybe it's time to let it go, start over." "There's no starting over," Lance interrupted. "Not until they pay for what they've done. Can you get me that information or not?" "Yeah," Jake sighed. "I'll find out, but be careful. This kind of anger can eat you alive." As tension in the house hit its peak, Lance knew the moment was near. He watched Fiona pace the living room, the phone pressed to her ear. "I don't care how you do it," she hissed. "Find him. He's out there somewhere. No, listen to me. If Lance goes public with this, we're done. Do you understand?" Finished. Warren entered the room, his face etched with stress. "Any news?" he asked. Fiona shook her head, tears welling up. "Nothing. It's like he's a ghost." "He's not a ghost," Warren said grimly. "He's very much alive, and he wants revenge." Warren pulled her into his arms. "We'll figure it out. We always do." Lance watched from the shadows, his rage simmering. They thought they could outsmart him, but they had no idea what was about to happen. That night, as Fiona and Warren slept in what was once his bed, Lance made his final preparations. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, they would understand what true loss was. Standing outside the house that used to be his, Lance hesitated for a moment, wondering if this was really what he wanted to destroy: not only Fiona and Warren, but possibly Isa's life as well. But then he remembered the betrayal, the lies, and the stolen years. His resolve solidified. There was no turning back now. Tomorrow, Fiona and Warren would learn that actions have consequences, and those consequences were about to crash down on their perfect little world. The night air felt heavy as Lance crouched in the shadows of his former home, his body tensed, ready for action. The time for waiting was over. Tonight he would reclaim what was his. Through the window, he saw Fiona and Warren in the living room, locked in another heated argument. Their voices carried through the thin glass. "Oh, we can't keep bling like this," Fiona said, her voice edged with panic. "He's out there, Warren watching, planning who knows what." Warren ran a hand through his hair, his frustration clear. "What do you want me to do?" "Fiona said he's my brother. He's my brud. So we can't just..." "Can't what?" Fiona snapped. "Pretend he doesn't exist?" "That's exactly what we need to do. We have a life here, Warren, a family. We can't let him ruin that." Lance's jaw clenched. Family. As if they had the right to use that word after what they had done to him. He watched as Warren paced the room. Maybe we should just tell him everything. Tell him the truth," Warren suggested. Fiona's eyes widened in panic. "Are you insane? He'd kill us both." "We don't know that," Warren countered. "He's still my brother. If we explain..." "Explain what?" Fiona interrupted, sarcasm dripping from her words. "That we were sleeping together long before he died. That we were relieved when we heard the news because it meant we could finally be together. Oh yeah, I'm sure he'd take that well." Lance's blood boiled at her words. Every suspicion, every fear he had was confirmed in that moment. They hadn't just moved on after he was presumed dead, they had wanted him gone. He had heard enough. It was time to end this. Moving swiftly and silently, Lance made his way to the front door. Taking a deep breath, he steeled himself for what was about to happen. Then, with a powerful kick, he burst into the house, the door slamming against the wall with a deafening crack. Fiona screamed, stumbling back. Warren spun around, his face drained of color as he saw Lance standing in the doorway. "Honey, I'm home," Lance said, his voice laced with venom. For a moment, no one moved. The tension in the room was thick, like the air before a storm. Fiona was the first to break the silence. "Lance," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, we can explain." "Explain?" Lance's laugh was harsh, devoid of any humor. "I've heard plenty of explanations. In fact, I just overheard a very enlightening one through the window." Warren took a step forward, hands raised in a pleading gesture. "Brother, please, let's talk about this. We can work it out rationally." It's it. Lance moved with lightning speed, pinning Warren against the wall, his forearm pressing hard against his brother's throat. Don't you dare call me brother, Lance snarled. Brothers don't steal each other's wives, so they don't take over each other's lives and pretend the other never existed. I thought you were dead, Warren gasped, struggling against Lance's grip. And you were so torn up about it, weren't you? Lance pressed harder. So devastated that you just had to take my wife to ease the pain? Lance, stop. Fiona cried, her voice desperate. You're going to kill him. Lance turned his fiery gaze on her. Like you killed me, he shouted. Do you have any idea what I went through? The hell I endured, thinking about you and Isa, waiting for me. Fiona's face crumpled as she sobbed. I'm sorry, she whispered. We never meant for this to happen, we thought. We thought. You thought what? Lance demanded. That you could just erase me, replace me with my own brother, and live happily ever after. He released Warren, who slumped to the floor, gasping for air. Lance turned his full attention to Fiona Dow, his voice dangerously low. How long? He asked. How long were you two sneaking around behind my back? Fiona's gaze flicked from Warren to Lance and back again. It doesn't matter anymore. I can't change the past. Lance's hand shot out, gripping Fiona's arm. How long? He demanded. 6 months, Warren choked out from the floor. Before your last deployment. We never intended for it to happen. It just happened. Lance finished, his voice dripping with contempt. Funny how betrayal always just happens, doesn't it? He let go of Fiona's arm, pushing her aside. She stumbled, catching herself on the couch. You know what the way worst part is? Lance said, his voice suddenly low. I fought so hard to get back to you, to our family. I went through torture, starvation, things you can't even imagine. And for what? To find out that my wife and my brother were glad I was gone. Fiona's face crumpled. That's not true, she whispered. We mourned you, Lance, we really did. Lord save it, Lance spat. I heard you earlier. You were relieved when you got news, remember? Finally free to be together without me in the way. Warren struggled to stand. Lance, please. We made a terrible, unforgivable mistake, but we can't change the past. We need to think about the future, about Isa. At the mention of his daughter's name, Lance's eyes flashed with fury. Don't you dare bring her into this. You've already turned her against me enough. Well, we haven't, Fiona began, but Lance cut her off. You told her I was dead, he roared. You let her grieve for me, let her think I abandoned her, while you played house with my brother. How is that not poisoning her? The sound of footsteps on the stairs made them all freeze. A moment later, Isa appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide with fear. What's going on? She asked softly. I heard yelling. Lance's anger softened at the sight of his daughter. He took a deep breath, trying to regain control. Isa, he said, his voice gentler now. I'm sorry we woke you. Your mom, your uncle, and I were just talking. So his eyes darted between the three of them, taking in Fiona's tear-streaked face, Warren's bruised neck, and Lance's clenched fists. Are you fighting because of me? She asked, her lower lip trembling. No, sweetheart, Fiona said quickly, moving to hug her daughter. This isn't about you at all. Lance watched as Fiona comforted Isa, a fresh wave of anger rising within him. That should be him, holding his daughter, not the woman who had betrayed him so completely. Isa, Lance said, his voice steady, I need you to pack a bag. We're leaving. But Fiona's head shot up. No, you can't do that. I can and I will, Lance snapped. She's my daughter, and I'm not leaving her here with you two liars for another minute. Warren stepped forward. Lance, be reasonable. You can't just take her in the middle of the night. We need to discuss this. Figure out a custody arrangement. Lance laughed bitterly. Custody arrangement? You're not her father, Warren. You're the man who'd destroy her family. You don't get a say in this. Isa looked between them, confusion and fear written on her face. Dad, what's happening? Soot, where are we going? Lance softened his tone as he spoke to her. We're starting over, sweetheart. Just you and me, away from all of this. What about Mom and Uncle Warrell? Isa's voice wavered. Lance's jaw clenched. They made their choice, Isa. Now it's time for us to make ours. Fiona tightened her grip on Isa. You can't do this, Lance. She has a life here, friends, school. A life built on lies, Lance interrupted. Is that what you want for her? To grow up thinking it's okay to betray the people who love you? Warren tried again. Lance, please, let's work this out for Isa's sake. Lance's patience snapped. In 2 swift steps, he crossed the room and delivered a hard punch to Warren's jaw. His brother stumbled back, blood seeping from his split lip. Lance, Fiona screamed, pulling Isa behind her. Lance stood over Warren, fists clenched. That's for taking my place, he growled. Didn't he? Delivered another blow to Warren's stomach, causing him to double over. And that's for my wife. Isa's sobs filled the room. Stop it. Please stop. The sound of his daughter's tears cut through Lance's rage. He stepped back, breathing heavily. "See," he said, his voice rough. "Go pack your bag. Now." Issa hesitated, looking to Fiona for direction. Fiona, tears streaming down her face, nodded slowly. "Go on, sweetie," she whispered. "It'll be okay, I promise." As Issa disappeared upstairs, Lance turned back to Fiona and Warren. "You have 10 minutes to say your goodbyes. After that, we're leaving. And if either of you tries to stop me, I swear I'll make you regret it." The next 10 minutes were a blur of tears and whispered words. Lance stood by the door, watching as Fiona held Issa tightly, murmuring words of love and reassurance. Warren, still nursing his wounds, knelt beside Issa, promising her that everything would be all right. Lance felt a pang of guilt at the pain in his daughter's eyes, but he pushed it aside. Toz was the best. He couldn't trust Fiona and Warren to raise her, not after what they had done. Finally, it was time to go. Lance took Issa's hand and led her toward the door. He paused, turning to face Fiona and Warren one last time. "I hope it was worth it," he said coldly. "I hope destroying our family was worth a few cheap thrills." Fiona's face crumpled. "Lance, please don't do this. We can work something out for Issa's sake." "You should have thought about Issa before you slept with my brother," Lance cut her off. "It's too late now." We turned to Warren, who was leaning against the wall, guilt and regret written on his face. "No, brother of mine," Lance said, his voice low and dangerous. "If I ever see you near my daughter again, I'll finish what I started tonight." With that, he walked out the door, Issa's small hand clutched tightly in his. Behind him, he could hear Fiona's muffled sobs and Warren's quiet attempts at comforting her. As they climbed into Lance's car, Issa turned to look back at the house. "Dad," she asked, her voice small, "are we ever coming back?" Lance started the engine, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "No, sweetheart," he said firmly. "We're not coming back. We're starting over, just you and me." As they drove away from the house that was no longer home, Lance felt a whirlwind of emotions. New anger and betrayal still burned in his chest, but there was something else too, a sense of freedom, of new possibilities. He glanced in the rearview mirror at Issa, who was staring out the window, silent tears streaming down her face. Lance's heart ached for her, for the confusion and pain she must be feeling, but deep down, he knew this was the right choice. He would guard her, guide her, and give her the life she deserved, free from deceit and betrayal. As the lights of their old neighborhood faded into the distance, Lance allowed himself a faint, grim smile. Fiona and Warren had taken everything from him, his home, his family, and years of his life. But that was over now. He had regained control. He had his daughter and a future ahead of them. It wouldn't be easy. Legal battles loomed. Fiona wouldn't surrender without a fight, but Lance was ready for that. But he had proof of their affair, of their lies, and he would use every tool at his disposal to keep his daughter by his side. As for forgiveness, that wasn't an option. Some betrayals cut too deeply, leaving scars that would never fade. Fiona and Warren had made their choices, and now they would live with the repercussions. Or the road ahead was uncertain, dark, but for the first time in years, Lance felt a sense of direction, a purpose. He had survived the worst to reunite with his family, and while that family looked different now than he had once envisioned, he would fight with all his strength to protect what remained of it. "Where are we going?" Issa asked, her voice small in the car's darkness. Lance reached back, gently squeezing her hand. "Somewhere new," he replied. "A place where we can start fresh. Just you and me, Kiddo. We're going to be okay." As the miles passed, Lance felt the weight of the past few years begin to lift. The anger still simmered beneath the surface, but it no longer controlled him. He had a new purpose now, to be the father Issa deserved, to provide her with the stable, loving home she needed. Fiona and Warren had stolen years from him, betrayed him in the worst way imaginable, but they hadn't broken him. He was Lance Cooper, soldier, survivor, father, and he was prepared to face whatever came next. The night stretched on before them, filled with uncertainty, but also with possibility. As they drove toward their new future, Lance made a silent vow. He would never let anyone harm his family again, no matter what it took or whom he had to fight. The road ahead was long and unknown, but for the first time in years, Lance felt ready to confront it. With Issa by his side, he believed he could face anything. The worst was behind them, and it was time to rebuild something new from the ashes of betrayal. Glancing at Issa one more time in the rearview mirror, he saw she had fallen asleep, her face peaceful in the soft glow of the dashboard lights. And looking at her, Lance felt a surge of fierce love and protectiveness. They had a long journey ahead, but they would face it together. As the first light of dawn began to brighten the sky, Lance allowed himself a small smile. The future was uncertain, but one thing was sure: he was back, and this time nothing and no one would stand in his way.